Next time you're in Dollar Tree, make sure you stop on over to Crafter Square and grab some wood pallet pieces. Over the past couple years, the designs and the sizes of the pallets have changed just a little bit, but these are still my favorite to grab. One of the most versatile ways you can use these pallets right here is to create a hanging wall shelf, and you can pick any background like this little house I grabbed from Dollar Tree. I'm taking off the little twine, and we're going to take this little LED floral piece here and take the front off. I figured that would look amazing on the house. Oh, it broke. Great. What a way to start the video. I was completely about to throw in the towel with this idea, and I was like, nah, we're not going to give up that easy. Instead, I grabbed my new tacky glue that I got, nipped the tip off that sucker, and started taking the tacky glue and putting it in the tiny little pieces where it snapped. The breaks were fairly straightforward. There wasn't anything missing, so I was confident that if I just finagled it in its places, that once they dried, it would look seamless. And I was painting this black anyway, so I was confident it was going to be completely covered up and no one's going to know. Who's going to know? No one, except for me and you, but you're not going to tell nobody. To paint up our pieces for this project, I'm going to be using DIY paint in the white Swan. Sammy over at Unicorn Dust Design sells this. There's a link down in the description. That's where I get this from. But people, use whatever chalk paint works for you. I have a ton of Waverly and I use that as well. I'm pouring a little bit out into a bowl so I can add some water. This stuff is clay based and it's really thick, so a tiny bit goes a really long way adding water, and it really does not affect the coverage. I've also recently discovered these little Mod Podge paintbrushes. They are linked down in my Amazon affiliate link, and I love them. They fit in my hands, and they're nice and thin and thick all at the same time. I just really appreciate these brushes. So I've been taking very good care of them, and I'm proud of me. Okay, no crusty bit Mod Podge paintbrushes around here. If you've never painted palettes before, they can be a pain because of all the little gaps. Adding some water or dipping them in a paint tray with paint and water really helps give you quick coverage and get them done fast, especially if you're doing a lot at one time. And I'm just taking a little bit of black paint here and going over the entire rows, and then I'm taking some of that black paint and going around giving some distressing onto the palette and onto the house. Once the little rose was dry, I grabbed some more of that tacky glue for a nice long-lasting hold and took some hot glue for a quick and instant hold and put that all around the back of this piece and applied it onto the center of the house. You could also use some staples for some reinforcement once you have your palette attached to your background. I like to use hot glue and tacky glue or wood glue or some E6000 or Gorilla Glue gel and allow it to dry first. And if you want to fill up the holes where the twine was, go right ahead, put some caulk in there, put some spackling, either one will be fine. Let that dry on up, and then put whatever hanger you want in the back of this little shelf. I love how this piece turned out. It is so beautiful. I don't use these large pallets nearly enough, but for this project, we're also going to need to grab one of these bamboo rings that you can get in a pack from Dollar Tree as well. I'm going to snip the back of this twine off the pallet because we're not going to be using that. And we're going to bust out the Mod Podge. Use whatever medium you want. We are going to be decoupaging on the front of this palette with TDS Decoupage Paper. This is called Avian News. This is my decoupage paper brand. It can be found at the DIYstruggle.com. Links are usually down in the description box, and sometimes papers may be out of stock, but they do restock every 3 to 4 weeks. I am just usually waiting on manufacturer to get my orders in. I'm taking a little bit of water on a paintbrush here and just getting the design out for our palette. And it goes without saying, people, take this idea, remix it to whatever works for you, decoupage whatever you want onto the palette. I just really love this piece and have been dying to use these little birds. I'm taking a fan brush and putting a little bit of our Mod Podge here onto it and just doing the first 2 pieces of our palette. The one thing about decoupaging these suckers, and I have decoupaged so many palettes, I've probably lost count at this point, you have to make sure you're placing whatever you're using, whether it's a piece of paper, whether it's tissue paper like this, a napkin, whatever it is, in the exact right spots so the design makes sense. I wanted to make sure that the bird's eyes were on here, so obviously you knew it was some birds. I didn't want to cut their eyes and their beaks off, you know what I'm saying? So I always try to take a little bit of special attention to detail whenever I'm doing a palette. Let this dry because our next part is going to be crucial to not destroying what you just Mod Podged or decoupaged on here. I mean, you can leave it like this, but I'm not going to. We're going to take an X-Acto knife and we're going to get the extra bits out. If your piece is not completely dry and you try to remove, whether it's a napkin, paper, I've done it all, from your palette, really from anything, as the edges are wet, it's going to shift with you trying to remove it. I like to use an X-Acto knife and then come in with a little sander, this little finger sander here, and I'm just going to push down. If you take the sander and go sideways at any given point like this, when it's not completely dry, you're going to shift your napkin all over the place. So just keep in mind that going straight down will guarantee your napkin's not going to shift if there are some little sections that are not completely dry. Using an X-Acto knife with your palette ensures that you're just getting extra fine bits off of here. I decided to take a little bit of antique Waverly wax and go around the edges and plop some little spots on our paper. And I'm just using a baby wipe for this and a tiny little bit, a little drop of it. Sometimes a little bit goes a long way with this stuff, but use as much as you feel like you need for your project. I'm just kind of putting a little bit of accent on here just to blend in our piece. And then I'm taking some of the same antique Waverly wax and plopping a couple spots over top of the actual paper so it really looks like one piece. When I was happy with that, I flipped this upside down and then used some hot glue and some tacky glue to attach our ring so we could just hang this right on the wall. We're going to make a planner using some fence palette pieces, and grab you some Market Fresh flower signs from Dollar Tree. While you're at it, you'll need to. I always forget about these little fence palettes, and I'm super happy that I remembered them for this project. We're going to also need some of these wood planks for our base, and I'm starting by just removing everything because we're not going to need any of that. And feel free to plug up whatever holes you want. I'm going to skip that part just for the sake of time. You don't really need me to show you how to plug up some holes, do you? I had this little square dowel laying around, so I decided that I was going to bring in the miter shears so this way we could cut this sucker in half. You could use little beads or whatever little things you want to create some feet, or just skip that completely, but I decided I was going to use this. And people, I just want to show y'all my skill, okay? Check this out. Look how perfect that cut is. I didn't even measure that. Y'all seen me, okay? I went right from bringing it in, introducing it, to snapping and snapping it. right in half. Okay, I was that fabulous. Let me toot my own horn sometimes, people. Anyhow, let's move on. We're gonna need some tacky glue and some hot glue or wood glue, whatever you want to use. Just make sure you're using a permanent glue that is going to give you a longer hold than just some hot glue whenever you're creating these types of DIY pieces. So this way they last longer than just a little bit. Unless you don't care, then use all the hot glue you want. I tacky glued this sucker on up, and I also added a little tumbling tower block right in the center just for some extra stability. Paint your piece whatever color you want. I decided to keep mine neutral and just add a little bit of black chalk paint around the edges for some accents. The palette pieces are slightly lighter, so I decided to paint them black so they matched the little accent that we did on our sign piece. It took some water to help spread the paint around a lot quicker. This is a wood burn marker. It's going to give us that faux wood burn look. There is an Amazon affiliate link down in my description box. In case you're interested, I do have it linked there. And people, there's scorch paste, there's scorch markers, there's all kinds of things. Pick whichever one works best for you. Honestly, this was super cheap on Amazon when I purchased it, and it's been working for me. So you know what? If it works, I don't see why not keep on rolling with it. I have learned a valuable lesson using this, that you should use your heat gun as you go, okay? Don't try and color in the whole thing and then go back for some odd reason. It doesn't work as well, and it will still have some of that yellow where it looks more like a marker than a faux wood burn look. So I just decided to color in a little bit and then take our heat gun and go over it, so this way it gave us our nice faux wood burn look. I purposely decided to keep this in real time and not speed anything up or mute the audio, so you could see for yourself without any camera magic tricks just how quickly this works. And then I was like, that's enough, and I decided to speed it on up for the rest of it. And as you can see here, it really blends in well with the natural wood burn look that Dollar Tree already had on the sign, and just gives it a very high-end look to me. Now that our base is dry, I'm just taking some tacky glue and some hot glue and putting everything together. And full disclosure here, people, our sign in the back that we're going to attach does not fit fully on here like the front sign, okay? And our fence pieces, we're going to need to cut them suckers because they're a little bit wider than we need them. So we only need 4 fence posts, and our miter shears cut them off just fine. Once I cut the little fence pallet pieces down to size, I plopped them right in their little spots and then made sure as I was gluing the back piece on to put some glue on the actual fence piece itself. So the back sign not only stuck to the little bit of space it had on our base, but it also stuck to the fence piece. It stuck to the fence pieces. To ensure that this piece wasn't going to fall apart, I took some extra tacky glue with a little paintbrush and just smooshed it all in there really, really well. So I knew that this piece was not going to fall apart. For this little tabletop decor piece, we're going to start out by needing a base, which I'm going to use a mirror, and we're going to need to create a stand, which we're going to use some of these DIY wood dice pieces for. Here's our wonderful palette, and we're going to need a little pot so we can, you know, put some flowers in it. I removed the hanger because we're not going to be using that, and then started gluing down some Scrabble pieces. You could absolutely use transfers for this, whatever, or leave it plain. You know what I'm saying? I decided to take some cute little Scrabble pieces with some tacky glue and hot glue and put them right on the top, just spelling out the word grow. People, you're going to want to make sure that you use some E6000 to attach your first dice to the mirror, for sure. Don't just use hot glue. I say this from experience because while I was trying to get away with just doing it like this and cutting a corner, and I had it setting off to the side, the whole thing fell off. So I was like, well, you gotta have that good glue on there no matter what. The palette was thin where it was attaching to our base, so I took a tumbling block and added that on there, so this way I didn't have to worry about any wobbling. If you want to just glue your pot on here, go right ahead, but I'm a fan of switching things out, so I had some of this wire manipulatable, that's what I like to call it. I know that isn't its real name, but whatever. And wrapped it around. And then I just spin it in the back. You know what I'm saying? Cut it down to size, spin it in the back, and shove it through the little holes in the pallet. You can glue this in the back, you can tape it in the back. It's interchangeable, so I absolutely love it because I am never one to just keep the same thing out forever. And people, if I'm being honest, I really love this idea, and I'm horrible at florals, so I ended up really hating the floral color choices that I shoved in this pot. So, meh. We're going to need 2 Dollar Tree pallets for this project. I'm using this as a little tabletop decor piece. You could absolutely hang this up. It would work either way. It's super versatile, but you will need to attach your pallets. There's several different ways you can go about this. I'm just taking a tumbling block and some tacky glue and some hot glue for this. Popsicle sticks would work as well, and you could also put one straight down the center. I decided to just do 2 tumbling blocks, one on each section that popped out. I found this little home sign and several others like it at Dollar Tree a while back, and I grabbed several because why not? And I got fear of missing out. You know what I'm saying? Believe it or not, looks are deceiving. This sucker was very hard to dismantle. I sped this up to like 6 times because, you know, you would have been watching me for a hot minute get this off this little piece of metal. There were some clumpy, chunky bits of glue on the edge. I got annoyed by that real quick and just removed some, and the rest I was like, nobody's gonna know but me, so we're just gonna leave it. Okay, we're just gonna leave it. But you remove your glue clumpy bits if you want. Okay, some of mine are still dangling on the pieces. I arranged our little home pieces on our pallets in the shape of a square. I also had a really cool idea for this as a long wall piece, but this next portion, oh yeah, I'm busting out the napkins. This next portion is going to take me some time, and I knew it, so I wasn't sure how long that was going to take, and I knew the larger this project was going to be, the more time it was going to take, because I really wanted to share the idea of how to decoupage like this. So here we go. If you've never decoupaged with a napkin before, you want to get all the sneaky layers off the top decorative layer. There are several ways you can go about this. One of my favorite is just to tear, and then it reveals the corners. You could also take a piece of painter's tape and put one on each side and pull it, or a little bit of Mod Podge in between your fingers, and it makes them a little sticky, and then that helps you be able to separate them as well. And before I get questions in the comments, this napkin is not in my napkin bundles on my website, but it will be come spring. Okay, I do sell napkin bundles on my website. We're gonna take a little paintbrush, put some water, and get all the writing and the bees off. Well, as many of the bees as we can. I really just wanted the sunflowers. You can also tear your napkin. I love doing that as well. But when you want to get something really specific or make the edges frayed, the water just helps that go along quicker. And it allows for extremely precise details when you're doing something like this. What are we doing? You may be asking yourself. We are going to take the designs and then place them around our palette in specific sections to just allow them to pop out around the houses. And I wanted to share this idea because sometimes you only got one napkin, or sometimes you only have specific designs on that napkin that you want to use for whatever your project is. And being able to take this idea and how I am trimming the sections around the house and then placing them on the palette is going to give you a better idea of how you can create that look with whatever you're decoupaging. Don't feel like you cannot create a larger piece when you only have something small. Once I was happy with all the sections that I had pieced apart, I then grabbed our Mod Podge and use whatever medium you want for this. I am familiar with Mod Podge. I use it all the time, and I really like using it on my smaller craft projects. The fan brush really gets in around the edges when you're going back and you're checking your napkin application, or if you're using tissue paper, because the edges of the fan brush are really thin, so it can really fit in tiny little pieces and smush extra medium in there without causing a lot of issues. I'm just taking my fingers to press this down. There are so many tiny sections. I didn't really want to call in anything to help me and possibly chance the napkin getting stuck to a sponge or a little piece of plastic or a roller that I was using to apply this. So I just took my fingers and tappity tapped it right on down into place. One thing I have also been trying to tell everyone is if you have a napkin that has a neutral background like this one, you can get away without painting your background. A lot of times you paint your background white, it helps the napkin pop out, but when you have something like this, you can completely get away with just placing the napkin down in sections and it will look like it is blended right onto the piece, especially if you're matching up the napkin precisely so it looks like it's connecting from one to the other instead of overlapping certain sections. And I'm going to show you what I'm talking about right here, where you can see I connected the green with the sunflower so that way it just all matched up and looked like one whole section. One thing I didn't show as I was going through the process is I continued to plop the little houses down where I wanted them and then decoupaged, plop the house down, decoupage, just to make sure I wasn't overlapping. And I was also trying to save as much time with the film as I could, so this way you guys weren't constantly seeing me just put the houses right back onto the palette. And then in this frame, I didn't remove the house in the one little section. But people, honestly, if you have a whole piece of paper or a whole tissue paper or a whole napkin to cover the section and you want to just cover the whole piece and put the houses in those spots, you go right ahead. This idea is, like I said, for people who only have a small napkin, a small design, a small piece of paper, whatever it is, and you want to do a larger piece. I want you to know that you can absolutely accomplish those looks with minimal design. And what really inspired this was the sunflower on this stencil. I wanted to cover the O up with it, okay? So I was like, I have to have a sunflower napkin around here. So I went looking for this napkin. I knew it was going in my bundles come spring, and I'm like, I can only spare one napkin. The struggle. I might spare another one. I let everything dry and then took my little sander and just went around trimming everything off. Once you've sanded everything down, if you want to go over it with a sealer, you go right ahead. You can also add in some accents on here if you want. I decided to just leave it exactly like it was, take my tacky glue and put everything into place. And I absolutely love how this turned out. As always, thank you all so much for hanging out with me today. I appreciate all of you so much. I know it's still Christmas time, but I thought let's switch it up today. And until next time.